Hi, I'm Laura Duggan. I'm the broker and owner of West Austin Properties in Austin, Texas, and I'm so glad that you've joined us today for 10 things every buyer should know before making an offer. You know, buying a home is really an exciting time, and it's so easy to get caught up in the emotion and excitement and think from your heart instead of your head. And so that's why I recommend doing a little homework ahead of time, because that'll really help you with choosing the right house when the right one comes along. You know, even the most analytical personality type lets their emotions take over when it comes to buying a house. And I see this all the time because a house is a home. It's where you relax, it's where you raise your family, and it's where you engage in downtime. So it's really important to pay attention to a few key details before the purchase so you have all the right information to make a good decision. So now we're going to talk about the most important things that you need to know right now. The first thing you need to make sure that you understand is agency. The law of agency. And what that means is who represents you in the transaction. Before you ever start looking for a home, you're going to want to select an agent that represents you in the transaction, because there are a number of ways that an agent can work with a client or a buyer or a seller. In Texas, there are 3 types of representation. The first one is when the broker represents the owner. That broker is called the listing agent. You're probably familiar with that one. The listing agent represents the best interest of the seller and the seller only. The listing agent has the duty to get the highest price and the best terms possible for the seller. The second type of representation, and you can see I've got a red arrow pointed to that one, is if the broker represents the buyer. That means that the broker is the buyer representative, and they represent the buyer and the buyer only, the best interests of the buyer. It's his duty, the agent's duty, to negotiate the best price and terms for the buyer. The third type of representation in Texas is called intermediary. And in this representation, the broker, with permission from both the buyer and the seller, serves as an intermediary in the transaction. As a broker, you know, I feel like you can never have 2 masters. So representing either the buyer or the seller in the transaction is my preference, and it's our company policy at West Austin Properties to only represent one party in the real estate transaction. Although in an intermediary relationship, it's the broker's duty to treat all parties fairly. It's really, really hard to represent 2 different parties in the transaction. So make sure that you know who is representing you in the real estate transaction. And in Texas, it's actually the law. You can see that at the very top of this disclosure. This disclosure information about brokerage services is the responsibility of the agent to discuss at the first meeting with the client about representation, who they represent, and how they get paid. So this is a pretty important duty of the agent. It's the first duty. The second thing that I think is really important for a buyer, especially to understand before they start looking for a home, is the contract and any addenda that might be used in their home purchase. And I tell my buyers that the time to learn the contract is not when you have to use it. I want my buyers to see the contract and read it thoroughly and have an opportunity to ask questions about all the different clauses in it, because a real estate transaction is a complicated business transaction, and the contract lays out all the terms for the purchase. So I actually give buyers a copy of the contract at our first meeting, at our buyer consultation meeting, so that we can go over the steps to buying a home and look over this contract. I give them a copy of the purchase agreement and all the addenda, which are the attachments to the contract, before they ever start looking for a home. So you'll need to read through these documents carefully and ask about anything that you don't understand. I just tell them to go through with a yellow highlighter and mark anything that we should discuss that is not clear to them. This is an ideal time to have your questions also answered by an attorney because, as you know, real estate agents in most cases are not attorneys and we cannot give legal advice. In Texas, we're lucky because our contracts are promulgated. That means they're written and approved by a committee of both lawyers, real estate lawyers, and real estate brokers. So they're pretty easy to understand, and they address all of the different things that usually can come up in a real estate transaction. But the important thing to know is that they're standard forms and that every agent must use them when selling a home. So as agents, we can fill in the blanks and the business details, but we can't practice law. So by reading and understanding the contracts before you start your home search, you won't get caught up in the excitement and overlook key details that can impact you down the road. This is one of many addenda that could possibly or likely be used in a real estate transaction. There are many, but this is just one example. It actually attaches to the main contract, and each of the addenda addresses some different part of the contract. This one has to do with the delivery of subdivision documents to the buyer within a negotiated period of time. This addenda is used, or this addendum, I should say, is used whenever you have a property that is located in a homeowners association. And in it, it states who is responsible for getting the subdivision information. And that includes the bylaws, the rules and regulations, and the financials to the buyer. And then it also states who's going to pay for that. Other important addenda could include there's a financing addendum that addresses credit approval. And then there's another one called a non-realty items addendum, which addresses any personal property that is going to transfer with the real estate transaction. That would be perhaps a refrigerator or a washer dryer that you want to convey with the property, to go with the property at the sale. Because it's not real property, it has to be covered in a non-realty items addendum. And then another example might be an addendum relating to the transfer of mineral rights. You see that occasionally. So gather all of the contracts and the addenda that you might use in a real estate transaction well in advance so that you have time to read and understand them. The next thing that I think is really important to review before making an offer on a home is the property history. Most real estate agents have access to the property's history through the MLS and the county tax records. We can find out a whole lot of information if we just dig a little. And the answer to these questions can really impact the value and make a difference in the offer that you make. So obviously, if a house has been on the market for 6 months or more and it has had no price changes or status changes, the seller may take less than list price if the agent can prove that the house is listed above market. So in the first one, days on the market, that's an important thing to know. CDOM means cumulative days on the market, and ADOM means active days on the market. Now, the difference between those two is cumulative days on the market can mean days on market with any real estate company. So if one company has it listed for 90 days and then it expires and goes to another company who has it listed for 30 days, the CDOM, or the cumulative days on market, would be 120. Active days on market would be 30, because active days on the market relates to the last company that has it listed. Now, price changes is another important factor. If there have been a number of price drops, that's even better for the buyer. And all of those price changes, up or down, because sometimes they go up, will mean something in your negotiation. Also, changes in status. Now, what that means is the property going from an active listing maybe to a pending listing, or even a sold status, because sometimes a buyer will buy a property, make some cosmetic changes, and then try to flip the property or sell it again in a short period of time. And all those things, any change in status always raises questions for me, because I'm going to want to know, was it under contract, in a pending status, and then the buyer changed their mind? Did the buyer terminate based on maybe a bad inspection? If so, what were the circumstances? And maybe the house recently sold and it's now back on the market. Then I'm going to want to know what improvements were made that justify a higher price. Extenuating circumstances of the sale. All changes in life affect the sale of real estate. In other words, people sell when things happen in their lives. They get married, they need a new home, they have a baby, they need a different floor plan. Maybe a parent comes to live with them, they need an extra bedroom. Perhaps there's a divorce and the property is being sold quickly, etc. So even though the seller isn't obligated to reveal personal details like an impending divorce or a job loss or a relocation to another city, their agent will often tell me if I ask, why the seller is moving. Mortgage history. I want to know if there are any liens on the property, how many liens there are on the property, and what they are, so that I know whether or not the seller has equity, what that equity is, and also if they owe more than the house is worth. So all of these things are important to know before making an offer. The property survey is a great thing to see before you make an offer. As a buyer representative, I always encourage buyers to obtain a current survey of the property. That means to purchase one. However, there's usually one available that was done when the buyer bought the property, or maybe even the buyer before that. And because that data, it's helpful to see it. You always want to get a new one, though, because that information, easements and things, can change. And so I always encourage a buyer to get a new one. The arrows on the left, that dark line, the very one that the red arrow is pointing to, that is the property line. So usually the property line is going to be darker than most. It's a little hard to see in this slide. But you want to look at where the property lines are. And then the one on the right shows that there is a sewer easement. All easements that are recorded at the courthouse should be on the survey. And the title company actually uses the survey to issue title insurance. It's really important that it be accurate. A survey is also important because it gives a graphic, not only of the property boundary lines and any recorded easements, but it shows the improvements to the property, like where the house is located on the property. It also shows other improvements like pools and sidewalks, decks, septic systems, wells, utilities, sheds, all of those kind of things. And in the corner of the survey, you should also see flood information. It's recorded on the survey as well. Now, this one does not have the surveyor seal, but make sure there is a seal on the survey. It's a stamped seal, and it has the date and the surveyor's name. It's a certification that that survey was done on that date by that person, and make sure that you can read the information. As I said, the title company is going to want to review that survey, and they will approve it. You want to make sure that the survey, again, is current before you purchase, because remember, the improvements can change. A seller might add a wall or a pool, etc., and you want to make sure that those improvements are within the boundaries and not encroaching on a building line or someone else's property. And I've seen that happen. So if you get a new survey, you can show it to contractors before you add a sprinkler system, a pool, and other improvements yourself. So a survey becomes a really great reference tool, not only during the time of purchase, but after it as well. So the next important thing that you need to see before you make an offer on a property is the property tax record. First thing that the property tax record is going to show you is who owns the property. Is it an individual? Is it a married couple? Is it an LLC or a corporation or a trust? All of those matter. You're also going to see the address of the property. And I know that if there is a seller whose address is out of state, that seller could be more negotiable on the sale of the property. And so I definitely want to know if they're living in the city, in the state, or out of state, or even out of country, because the address on the property tax record shows where the tax bill goes. It also gives the legal description, and that's an important factor. It gives the size and improvement, so it's going to tell you what the approximate square footage is. Now, I have to warn you that this square footage number is often incorrect. So be sure that you verify that you do not rely on the square footage that's in the tax record, because sometimes people add on to their home and they don't report it, and so the property could be larger. It could also be smaller. Usually the size that the county has is the size that was filed by the builder to get their permits. So again, changes can be made and it can't be wrong. It'll list improvements like a swimming pool. I have seen, though, where things are left off. So again, verify. It'll show the assessed tax value for the past 3 years. We're going to actually look at one in a minute, and an example of one so you can see these. It shows the actual taxes that were paid and any tax exemptions, because there are exemptions. There's a homestead exemption in Texas. If the person is living in the property as their primary residence on January the 1st, they get a little break on their taxes. There's also a over 65 exemption, and there is a disabled exemption. So you want to make sure that you know whether or not the property has those exemptions, because it will affect the taxes. If you think the taxes look low and those exemptions are in place, then you buy the property and those exemptions go away. Your taxes could increase quite a bit. Then it's going to show the entities that are assessing the taxes and what the various tax rates are. Each entity, like the county, the city, the school district, they all have their own tax rate. And so your different entities are going to be listed there and their rates. It's also going to show the transfers of the property, so you can actually go back and see the chain of ownership. This is useful to me, especially if I see that the property at one time was a foreclosure, because then I want to take an extra good look at the property to make sure that in an inspection to make sure that the property is in good shape. And it'll also show liens against the property. Here's an example. Let's take a look at this. It shows the owner's name is Ground One Investments, and that's an LLC. So I know that the title company is going to need the documentation from that LLC to issue a title commitment. They're also located in Houston, so that might mean to me that the seller would be a little bit more negotiable on the sale. It gives the MLS listing information. It tells the location as far as the school district and which schools are in the attendance area there. Over on the right under location, it's going to show you the legal description of the property. And then below it is the tax information, the parcel ID number, and then the assessments and the valuations for each of the last 3 years and a preliminary for the year that you're in. So you can see what the total market value is, the land, and the improvements. And let's see, this one doesn't show the exemptions, but you will want to look for that. Under characteristics, it gives the different improvements. It shows that it was built in 2006, that it's 5-bedroom, that it's got a composition roof, 3-car garage, an open porch. And usually this one has a pool and it's not listed, so that's what I'm talking about. Oh, it does say pool over here on the right, concrete pool, etc. But notice that the square footage is reported at 4,005 and then again at 4,130. That is the difference between two measurements. The first one was probably filed by the builder, and then the second one was a square footage that was measured by an appraiser and reported through that venue. So they list both. The point is you need to verify those square footages, especially if you're going to rely on them. All right, the next really important thing that you need to look at before you make an offer is the seller disclosure. In Texas, most sellers are required to give the buyer a disclosure about the condition of the property, and there are very few exceptions, like, for example, if the property is in an estate, the estate is not obligated to give a disclosure. But most sellers are required to disclose any known defects in the property, any inspections or reports that relate to the condition of the property. And so this page tells that the seller is occupying the property, and the items that are checked yes, no, and unknown are those that are present on the property. And then on the next page, you can see it gives who the water supply is supplied by, if the property was built before 1978, you must list it there, the roof type and the age of the roof. And then the next paragraph is whether or not the seller is aware of any defects in the property, and they actually list some out. So that the seller has to check yes or no on basement ceilings, doors, driveways, electrical, etc. And then again, are you aware of any of the following conditions? And the conditions are listed: aluminum wiring, asbestos, and they have to answer yes or no. Diseased trees, endangered species, fault lines, toxic waste, improper drainage, etc. So all of those items are important, and a seller disclosure can really vary in length. We have several that we can choose from. This one happens to be put out by our Texas Association of Realtors, but our Board of Realtors has one also that's a little bit longer than this one. And the seller asks the buyer to sign that disclosure to prove that they received it. So let's move on. Seller insurance history. This is not usually available until you actually go under contract, but sometimes I can get the insurance information from the listing agent. And what I ask for is what the insurance coverage is on the property, who is the current policy holder, and what is the coverage. And I want to know if there have been any claims. we had some fires here in our area because we've had such a drought. And it was really important to know, especially in that area, if claims were made for fire or smoke damage. And sometimes you can't see any damage, so it's important to check what they call the clue report. And that is an independent report that every property has. Each insurance company relies on this claim history on the property. It's a database of claims. So you can ask for the clue report on the property. If you consult with an insurance agent during the time that you're buying the property, you can ask them to pull the clue report for this property, and they will, but it's great to have them share it with you. Now, this is a really great resource of information, and you can use it to see if the property has had any major claims for fire, water, hail, mold. All of those could affect your ability to get insurance on the property, and also the rate that you're going to pay for the coverage, because if it's had a big claim for something like that, it's likely to have a higher rate, and if you don't want to pay a higher rate, you might want to choose a different house. By the way, insurance companies now review both the property and the applicant before making a commitment to insure the property. So the buyer's credit and claims history could also affect your rate and your ability to get coverage. So you're wise to speak to an insurance agent, somebody that you trust, before you begin your home search, so you'll know what your capabilities are and where you stand on getting coverage and what the cost is likely to be. All right, the next thing that I like buyers to see before they make an offer are the deed restrictions and restrictive covenants of the subdivision. Every buyer should ask for and thoroughly read the deed restrictions and restrictive covenants for the neighborhood of the house that they're making an offer on. Now, the subdivision documents can usually be found online. I just go and Google the subdivision. If the listing agent doesn't have these already, have them posted either with the MLS or somewhere else. I just Google the subdivision and see if the Homeowners Association might have these restrictions posted. A lot of them do. What deed restrictions are a set of rules and restrictions that are placed within the deed of a property, and they limit the way a property can be used. And they transfer with the deed. So that's an important thing to know, because they go with the deed and the sale of the property. Restrictive covenants are the restrictions that apply to a group of homes in a neighborhood or subdivision, and they're usually created and put into place by the developer when the subdivision's approved. They govern the neighborhood's appearance, and they control what happens, what the activities are in a neighborhood. So they dictate things like the size and the type of the houses that are in that neighborhood, what construction materials can be used. I've seen them dictate roofing material, like they'll require tile roofs or wood roofs or metal roofs, or they'll say you can't have a wood roof. Anyway, all those types of things are dictated within these restrictive covenants. I've also seen them do landscaping requirements. I've seen subdivisions even have a list of plants that you can and cannot use. And types and size of pets. You can see a horse out here in the yard or the pasture in front of this house, but not all subdivisions allow horses or roosters or chickens or anything but domestic animals. And I've even seen them limit say pit bulls and those kinds of animals. They can dictate parking rules where you can't park on the street, or you can only have 2 cars in a driveway, or you have to park in your garage, etc. They can dictate exterior paint colors, so you can't paint your house purple. Rules for guests. They might have a rule that says you can't have a guest at your home for more than 30 days, or that type thing. They can dictate fencing. So you might be able to have wrought iron fencing, but you can't have chain link, etc. Vehicle storage, they might dictate that you cannot have an RV or a boat or whatever parked anywhere on the property. They control outbuildings. I've seen them dictate tree cutting, where you'd have to get a permit to cut a tree or approval from the homeowners association. And a lot of these homeowners associations have architectural control committees, and they control any time that you make an improvement. So before you buy a home or make an offer on a home in a homeowners association, you're going to want to know the restrictions and the penalties for non-compliance. All right, homeowners association documents. We talked about those a little bit earlier, more briefly, but properties that are located where a homeowners association exists have important documents that definitely should be reviewed before making a purchase. The HOA is created to protect and preserve the value in a private community. And the restrictions are really there for the good of the whole community. They actually preserve the value. So where I know they're somewhat restrictive, they do have a good side, because you won't have somebody coming in breaking the rules that might diminish your property value. A board of directors is elected by the membership to enforce the rules, and they lay out the services and expenses in the budget. And the HOA also collects dues that all homeowners are required to pay. And as I said, there can be an architectural control committee that reviews and approves any additions and improvements in accordance with the rules. So, for example, if you wanted to put up a fence, or you wanted to put a little storage shed in your backyard, or you wanted to add an addition to your property, or you wanted to put a guest house on the property, all of those things would be examples of possible need of approval from this architectural control committee. If you're going to buy a house in a subdivision and you know you want to add one of these things, it's best to get the approval of the architectural control committee before you ever negotiate an offer. Just to make sure that you can do that. Or you might make your offer contingent upon approval from the architectural control committee to get done what you want to do. So you should review the declaration, the bylaws, the certificate of incorporation, the restrictive covenants, the budget, and the minutes of the last 3 board meetings. Man, can you get a good view of what's happening in the neighborhood by looking at the minutes of the board meetings. And you'll be able to find out if you got unhappy homeowners in that neighborhood. Also, you'll find out if there are future monetary assessments that are planned. Sometimes homeowner associations have to do things in the subdivision that are going to require money from the homeowners. I've seen them have to rebuild a retaining wall, or perhaps insurance is going up in the neighborhood and they've got common property, so they're going to have to do an assessment. You're going to want to know if future assessments are planned. And you'll see by looking at the budget what shape their finances are in. Now, if you're going through a lender, the lender is likely going to want to get copies of these items as well, especially the budget and maybe the minutes, because they're going to want to see if there are any pending lawsuits against the homeowners association and if their insurance is current. And a lender can refuse to make a loan on a property in a neighborhood where there's a lawsuit pending, or if the insurance is not current, or even if they're future assessments. So all those things are important. They can affect your enjoyment of the property and, of course, your cost and ability to get financing. Some associations, and this is really important, also have rules about renting the home out, and others have a first right of refusal clause in their association rules that the Homeowners Association has the first right to purchase the property when it's sold. So you should know the details of the governance of these HOAs and how the restrictions could affect you before making a purchase in a HOA. Schools and medical facilities. Whether you have school-aged children or not, you'll really want to pay attention to the school choices in the neighborhood. Schools are the number one factor I find when buyers are purchasing a home. If they've got school-aged children, they're worried about how well the school performs, what kind of education their child is going to get. And if they don't have school-aged children, they want to be located in an area where the schools are good for resale. And it's really easy to find out about the schools because there's so many websites now that have statistics which are easily available on each school. In fact, each school typically has a really good website. You want to look at some independent ones as well. But each school has a website, and you can tell a lot about that school by visiting the website. And I've even had buyers that physically wanted to go and look at the schools before making an offer on a home. And I think that's a good idea too. I find that homes that are within walking distance to a good elementary school are more appealing than homes that are close to a middle or high school. And proximity to a private school, a good private school, is really an added bonus. So schools are always an important part of the resale and appreciation factor. And so you'll want to pay close attention to that. And then finally, medical facilities are also important, especially if you're dealing or if you have any kind of health issues, or maybe you're over 50. I'm over 50. I want to be close to a medical facility because honestly, you never know. And I don't want to take a helicopter ride if I need medical attention. So anyway, those are two more that you're going to want to pay attention to. Finally, the agent that you choose is really important in your real estate transaction. There are 1.2 million agents in the United States, and unfortunately, all of them were not created equally. 30% of the licensees in the United States got their license in the last 3 years. And I think credentials and experience are really important. Like I said, a real estate transaction is a complicated and complex business transaction. There are so many moving parts, and there are hundreds of decisions to be made in a home purchase. So you're going to want to have somebody that has had the experience and dealt with almost everything that you can think of that could possibly come up in a transaction to be your representative. After all, it doesn't cost you anything more to work with someone that is highly experienced and really knows their numbers. At West Austin Properties, we analyze the market every single month and publish a market report that you can see on our website at westaustin.com under market reports. We break down our market by price band and by zip code and by area, and we show you the numbers of sales, the number of active listings, the days on market, and what the absorption rate is. That's how fast homes are selling in each of these price ranges and zip codes and areas. That is really great information to know. And with a West Austin property agent, we have been doing business in the Austin area for over 40 years. We know our numbers. We're highly experienced. We have designations that prove our expertise. The CRS is the Certified Residential Specialist. It takes years to get this designation and a proven track record of sales that have to be submitted to the National Association to get that designation. Also, the accredited buyer representative, it's additional training on working just with buyers in the market to help them achieve their goals. The senior residential or senior real estate specialist, seniors have special needs. We're trained to work with seniors to help them move into the next part of their life, help their families deal with the real estate issues and all of the things that come about moving a senior into a different lifestyle. And the certified luxury home marketing specialist, we hold that designation as well. So we're all Austin natives, and we would absolutely be delighted to help you with your home purchase. Thanks so much for attending, and we'd love to help you with your home purchase. So give us a call. I'm Laura Duggan. I'm the broker owner. My partner is Gail Boston, and either of the two of us, we work together on almost everything, but either of the two of us would love to visit with you. And thanks so much. I hope you have a great day.